Alright guys, welcome to the first video in the series, and in this video we are going to go over components. So what are components? Components are the smallest level of functionality that you can utilize in React Native to construct your application. So they are comparable to bricks that you might use to build a building, and each component can be aggregated with other components to either build features or entire applications with React Native. So what you're seeing here is a React Native component. So a component is just a JavaScript function or a TypeScript function. And in this case, the app component is the rootmost component. And in this case, it's being used as a container that will be containing all of the other components that will be live in the application. Now, what I've done in this project is I've pre-created these projects for you. So this finished components project is going to be the fully fleshed out project that has everything completed in it. And then this one is going to be empty and available for you to flesh out after you watch this video. And this is how all the other subsequent videos are going to be laid out. So then in this function, what we're going to have is we're going to have logic that decides how and what to display or to return in terms of UI from this function component. And then it has the actual individual functions that it will be returning, which, I don't have anything here right now. And those UI elements will also contain some styling information so that things can be laid out, colored, and styled in the way that we want. So if we get started in building a component, what we would do is we can create, or we can import from React and React Native. So what I'm importing right here, is pre-made components that are available for us from React Native that are kind of bread and butter components that you would use across any kind of possible application that you could build. And so the React team has made these sorts of components already available and fleshed out for us so development can be faster. So then if I start out, I can create a component. Again, it's just a function. And this component is going to act as a parent container or a parent view, much like how the app component is acting as the root container for the entire application. So this is going to be acting as a sub-container. Now, when we create these components, or they are created for us, either way, when they are created as functions, again, JavaScript functions, right? But when they are utilized, we are using this HTML-like syntax called JSX. So we create them as functions, but we utilize them as JSX. And the reason for this custom syntax, although it looks kind of weird if you're coming from, say, a Swift UI or an Android Jetpack Compose background, they are just syntactic sugar. They're really just shortcuts into actual JavaScript code. So we write in this style, the JSX style, but React, the runtime, is going to actually expand all of this shorter code into a much longer version that's all JavaScript. So it just makes development faster and easier, and that's why it's being made available. Hey guys, I wanted to let you know that the video you've been watching is actually part of my course on Udemy called Learn React Native Fast. And in this video, we take React Native, TypeScript, and Expo and teach how to build mobile applications. If that sounds interesting, take a look at the description and I'll provide a link that gets you the course for $10. So I have this container, right? But I want to do something actually visible or displayable with this container, right? So I can then create another function. And then in this function, I can return something that I want to actually display on the screen, right? Because remember, this is just a container. It doesn't really have visibility. This is what's going to be, this or things like this is what's going to be putting something visible onto the screen. So then now that I have these two distinct components, how am I going to marry these two components, or how am I going to get them to work together? So the way that I can do that is I can create a parameter for the component, because remember, it's just a function, right? So I'm taking advantage of the fact that it's a function, and I'm able to pass parameters to it. And here what I'm doing is I'm just doing an inline type, because we're only going to use this once, so I'm not going to bother creating a type alias or a interface. So I'm just going to put it inline. And what I'm saying is this children parameter that I've destructured could be another component. It could be a group or an array of components, or it could be just simple text. And this type gives us that flexibility that's already built into React. So then I'm going to take this component parameter that's been injected, and I'm going to make use of it inside of my parent component. So now what I've done is I've created the possibility or the capability where, without having to write this code myself within this component, that I can simply get anything that I desire that can be injected in here that is of type this. And again, like I said, it's a very broad range of types that can be injected in. And then that thing, that component, will do that work for me. So what I'm doing is I'm composing these components as opposed to inheriting. I'm composing these components so that I'm able to make use of them in a very simple and straightforward way without having to reinvent the wheel every single time I want to, well, for example, display some text, right? So now I've created these two components. So I'm going to go back to my root container component, and then I'm going to make use of these. So I'm going to create a root, I guess you could say. And I'm going to put these guys inside of there. So in this case, I'm using the styling because, as you'll see in a moment, if I don't, things will appear off screen because there are certain rules in regards to the default behavior of layout of these components. And therefore, I'm putting in my own rules to override those so you can actually see what I'm about to show on the screen. And we'll get into much more detail in future videos about styling and theming and related activities, but let's stick with the component stuff for now. So I'm going to take the one that I wanted to make a subparent, and I'm going to add that first, right? So now, without doing any work, because like I said, Vue was already created for us, and it was already created for us in such a way that it could accept children. So other than creating this component, I didn't do any other work to enable the placing of it or injecting of it as a child inside of the view. I just got it for free, right? And then I took this component A and I put it in here. And then now I'm going to take my component B and I'm going to make this guy a child of A. So the obvious benefit is the one that I already mentioned, which is less boilerplate, less code, less, JavaScript kind of running amok all over the place. But in addition to that, what you can see is a very easily understandable kind of flow to this code. In other words, you can see structure and layout in this code, even though you didn't have to write anything specific in order to get that. And that's one of the secondary benefits of using this component JSX style of coding. So before I kick this off, I'm going to add a style here because the fonts are too small. So let's just make this a 40, right? So then if I save this and then I start up Expo like this, you can see that the Expo utility runtime kicks off. So what is this guy doing? So Expo has, among the various features that it helps you code React Native apps with, it has this server that allows your current running application to connect to the specific simulators that you want to run. So in this case, for sample purposes, I'm going to run the iOS simulator. So this thing is going to compile all the code. It's going to bundle up the files, push to the running the running simulator application, and it's going to deposit those bundled files into a small client on the simulator itself called Expo Go. And that is what allows the communication, the debugging communication, to happen between the simulator and your IDE, in this case VS Code. So then now that this is finished, we can see that our text is here. And if we go in here and update it, we can see that we get additionally that real-time updating of code changes from our IDE automatically propagated to the simulator device. Now you notice that there was a small warning that displayed. So whenever we have warnings, whenever we have failures, they're going to come up both here as a little pop-up dialog, which you can click on and expand to full size view. But they also generally will show up here. Now this is just a warning. It doesn't fail the application or anything like that. And what you'll find is a lot of these warnings are actually not true, actually, or kind of older warnings that are no longer true today. And the reason for that isn't because, React Native is terrible or whatever, is because React Native is in fact supporting 3 different platforms that it does not have direct control over. And that's the same thing with Expo as well, obviously. So iOS, the Android platform, and even the web platform, Meta, the company that created React Native, doesn't directly control those platforms. So on a regular basis, as you can imagine, they're always being updated, modified, transformed in some way. So there's a little bit of a lag in between the time that the new changes in those platforms may come out and then the updates that have to happen on the React Native side or the Expo side. So from time to time, you're going to see these issues. And if they are errors, unfortunately, you're going to have to do what you normally do as an engineer, which is Google search. And I guess these days it might be ChatGPT, and kind of debug through those issues and try and resolve them. But for the most part, they don't happen that frequently, and you should be, pretty much okay. So that was a very fast introduction to components. And what I'm going to do is after the state management portion, I'm going to start combining these base levels of knowledge that we have together and building out bigger and bigger examples. So let's continue.